Known as Cornish Damo, here in my usual Sunday night slot, and once more this week I'm joined by a panel of special guests to discuss an issue that mainstream sources may have covered, but perhaps a lot of it, not much attention has been brought around by it. Rishi Sunak famously stood up and said he was putting an arm around individuals and businesses, that he was going to protect them and support them. But as with any promise from the Tories, and especially this Tory government, the devil is in the detail, and his promises were full of holes. And there are many reasons why a lot of people are not, as cuddly Uncle Rishi has implied, protected and supported at all. In fact, this applies to some 3 million UK taxpayers, 10% of the UK workforce. And to discuss this with me tonight, I'm joined by a panel from Excluded UK, which describes itself as an inclusive alliance for the excluded. I'm joined today by Rachel Flowers, one of the founders of Excluded UK, Tim Smith and Cheryl Jones. Welcome to all of you. How are you?
Hey, Damien.
Fine, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for giving me your time today. Perhaps we should start by discussing who Excluded UK are, how you came together, what brought you in and what your aims are. Introduce yourselves, as it were.
Sure. Well, as you've said, and thanks for the introduction, it's an estimated 3 million UK taxpayers who have been unable to access meaningful support from the government schemes in relation to COVID since way back in March 2020. And these people come from very diverse backgrounds, all over the UK, from all walks of life, all sorts of professions. They're a mixture of people that were self-employed or running small businesses, but also different worker statuses such as PIE freelancers, people that were employed but moving between jobs, people that have been denied furlough by their employers. And here we are over a year later, and the vast majority of those people have still been unable to get that meaningful support because the Chancellor has repeatedly refused to extend or amend the schemes, despite many calls upon the government to do so. The most important probably is by the Treasury Subcommittee back in June, July, so that was pretty early on in the process. That call has been ignored. And then we at Excluded UK were the entry point for an all-party parliamentary group, now called Gaps in Support, which has 280 MPs cross-party. Lots of other influential figures have joined our call for parity, such as John Cordwell, who's the UK's biggest taxpayer, Martin Lewis, the money-saving expert, and Gina Miller, a well-known activist. So we have had support for the cause, and it's widely acknowledged that this number of people have been excluded. It's the fact that there doesn't seem to be any political will to actually close the gaps, and now has had a devastating impact on people's lives. We're talking families, households, and pushed into debt and poverty since then. It's been really hard to watch and be part of, to be honest.
So what is your story then, Rachel? What brought, you're one of the founders, of course, what brought you together with the other founders, and how did Excluded UK form as a result?
Well, my background's in law, and I'm a limited company director. I've been running a consultancy business for over 10 years. I've got 2 young children. So when the gaps in the scheme first became evident, my role, as I saw it, was really to just try and help shine a light on that injustice and be part of the solution. So a lot of what we did in the early months at Excluded UK was collate data and really we're taking a stance to the government that we're sure you didn't mean for this to happen. And, you've put the schemes up really quickly. They're great. They're helping a lot of people, but look at all these people who aren't being helped, and let us help you to fix this problem. Obviously, then our dialogue has changed over the months because we started to get basically lack of engagement. We weren't getting responses, and we were finding it very difficult to get answers on the questions that we had. And so that has changed over the months, I think. My position personally, the reason I'm still here fighting on is because I care deeply about this community of people who do not deserve to have this happen to them. They were in viable jobs, running viable businesses. There's no question that they've done anything wrong. In fact, the wording from the Treasury report was through no fault of their own, they've been excluded from these schemes. So there's arbitrary rules, there's like cut-off dates or figures, like cliff edge figures, you need to have done this or that within this period, but going back historically. So the best example we can give is to qualify for the self-employed scheme, you need to be able to qualify across 3 years tax returns going back as far as 2016, and some people are excluded on that cut-off point, and Cheryl can tell you more about her situation because she's a good example of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fundamentally the underlying point to what you're doing is that the people who are affected by this are affected through no fault of their own. It is circumstances beyond their control have led to this. And an arbitrary time scale of post 2016, which was well before this pandemic hit us. It does seem a little bit of a fix to avoid supporting people who need that bit of support. And of course, the people who are affected by this, it's 10% of the UK workforce. They come from all walks of life, all manner of circumstances. And I've come to Cheryl and to Tim now, who can maybe tell us a little bit more about their circumstances and why they have been excluded. Cheryl, should we come to you first?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Rachel, for just explaining exactly what Excluded is about and how relentless she's been. She needs to be commended, honestly. She's amazing. So my circumstances is I served in the armed forces for 22 years. I left in 2010. It was very hard to get back into civilian life, but over a few years I did. And during that time, I set up my own business, which, again, I was very proud of. It was a pet sitting business. I started off dog walking, pet sitting, and it grew to be an amazing business. And I mean, again, when you get out of the armed forces, you've been paid every month. To be self-employed, I think, is a very brave thing to do. And all of these 3 million people are these, they're these brave people that have done this, and they've taken that step. And, so my circumstances were, obviously, when the 23rd of March, that will be etched in my brain for a very, very long time. This pandemic happened. We thought it might be 2-3 months, well, 2-3 weeks at first, and then it turned into months. And when I discovered that I was not eligible, I thought it was a mistake. And so I contacted HMRC because the criteria was the last 3 years. I've been running 10 years. And then all of a sudden, they sent me a letter and said it was because at the 50% rule. And like Rachel said, they've put all these barriers in. They've added these things for the self-employed people, which is absolutely despicable, to be honest. And so it was a few £100 that was the difference of actually getting help. So if I could just briefly explain the 50% rule, because obviously this is how it's affected me. My pension is just over 10,000. My self-employment, taking off all the expenses, which is how the self-employed work, take that off is just under 10,000. So basically half of my wage has been cut. I'm not entitled. But if my self-employment was just slightly more than my work, my pension, then I would get help. And I would have got 80%, and I wouldn't have been excluded. And I still, to this day, do not understand that rule. And I think it's absolutely disgusting that that was even introduced. And obviously, I've now joined, I joined the Excluded UK, and it made me realise that obviously I wasn't on my own. There was 3 million people in the same boat. And as the months have gone on, like everybody, I think we all thought, they'll realise Rishi Sunak will do the right thing. He said he was going to wrap his arms around us. But clearly he is not going to help us. He has made that very clear as the months have gone on. And so where I am now is I love Excluded UK. And like Rachel said, it's about the empathy and helping the others. But this is about parity. This is about everybody being equally the same. Equality and diversity comes into it. At the end of the day, we're being discriminated against. And it's absolutely diabolical what has happened to us. And so at the moment, I am absolutely behind the Excluded UK. I have been very much involved. I've done a lot. And the media side of things, I thought we have done an unbelievable job. Rachel is always on the media, always going on about everything. Tim has done his fair amount of media coverage. I've done my fair amount of media coverage. It's not something that I thought I'd be doing, but because of this injustice, my passion has grown and grown. My confidence has grown and grown. And I will see this through to the end, no matter what.
Thank you very much for that,
anyway,
Cheryl.
Sorry about that. But...
No. It's so moving to hear you speak. And I'd just like to say as well that when you first started speaking out on behalf of Excluded UK, which is back in last summer, and I remember when we first spoke and you were sat in your uniform with all your medals, it was incredibly moving. But you won't mind me saying that your mental health was a terrible place at that stage. Because I remember you saying to me, I have served my Queen and country for over 25 years. And we have a lot of veterans in our community, don't we, excluded on this particular rule. And I remember vividly you saying to me, it never occurred to me that this government or any government would turn its back on me, having served my country in the way. And I was heartbroken by that. And I just want to mention that because it's really important, that journey that you've almost like had to come to terms with seeing society through a new lens, haven't you?
Yes. Rachel, you're absolutely correct. When we did that thing and my mental health was, I was at the bottom. I was on the verge of going under, I would say. And then I found the Excluded and you brought me out, and I'm now obviously seeing the world in a very big way, and my eyes have been opened, and I am absolutely disgusted at this government for the injustice that they've served upon the people that I've met over these, how many months? Nearly a year. It's honestly, well, thank you for saying that. And you're absolutely right. I was at my lowest, but now I'm not. I have, you know me yourself. I've excelled and I am, I've come back fighting a lot stronger, and I'll continue fighting for the Excluded, no matter what.
Yeah, mental health issues are difficult to work through. I've had my own share. Many people from many different walks of life have, while this government have been in charge for a great many reasons. Tim, can we come to you, sir? What's your involvement been with Excluded UK? What brought you in? How is it? How have you found it? How was the being excluded affected you?
Well, just listening to the mental health side of it there, and I think that's something you'll hear a lot about, because that is something which has gravely affected a lot of people who have been excluded. And for me personally, it was less about me finding excluded and more them finding me. It was. So I'm excluded simply because I started my new job at the wrong time, essentially. Back in March last year, I moved from Wales down to Cornwall to start with an employer I tend to work the seasons with, because I'm a chef. So I remember being stood at the pass in the kitchen watching Mr. Sunak on the iPlayer saying how, no one will be left behind, we're all in this together and that we'll do whatever it takes. And then a couple of days later, my employer called me to say that I'm ineligible for the furlough scheme. And the reason I was ineligible was because I got paid after March the 19th. So although they did ask employers to stand by their employees and retain them through this pandemic, my employer, despite wanting to, was unable to because of a simple date. I didn't understand it as much as I understand it now, because as far as I was concerned, I was just the sort of chap who I'd rock up in work, do my hours, go home, get paid at the end of the fortnight, So, never been self-employed, never owned my own business. I've always worked for limited companies. That's something which worries me a bit moving forward when I think the amount of limited companies that have been excluded from support. I say that is a fear, but the whole situation left me in quite the mess. I've always been a low earner. I've worked in the likes of your factories, your care jobs, and I retrained in 2017 to become a chef. Started following that because I discovered it was quite something I was passionate about. Moved down to Cornwall, as I said, in March, and then I think I managed 12 days with my employer, who I'd worked for a couple of times before. So you could probably verify that she wasn't, fraudulent or what have you. She'd got a lot of trading history over many years. And I was just told that basically, although she wants to, she can't furlough me. And the only option available for somebody like myself was universal credit. And boy, did that open my eyes up to universal credit. I went through the whole rigmarole of it, which was probably longer than it needed to be at the time, because a lot of people were doing the same at the beginning of the pandemic. And then I had to wait until April for my first payment from it. I was only going to be entitled to £417, which was, I tend to earn £1,800 a month, so it was nowhere near 80% of my wage. It was a massive decrease. But then when April arrived, I actually received nothing. And the reason I received nothing was because my employer had paid me on the 28th of March for the 12 days that I'd worked. So it wiped out everything I was due in April, which put a right span in the work, because now I was stranded 250, 300 miles away from my family in a living job down in Cornwall. No money to my name. It got to the point where I could barely even feed myself. Forget my bills, which mounted up in that first week, because I went there expecting that I'd be paid a fortnight later. So, I'd be all right. And it was far from it. And, just being quite secluded. So, the start of the pandemic, we were all unaware of what COVID really, really was. We didn't have as much of an understanding as we do today. I was quite panicked, to be fair. I'm quite a resilient chap. I just get on with things. But I went downhill pretty fast. I put it down to not sleeping, to not being able to pay my bills, not eating properly, so I wasn't refueled. Being alone and reading all the stuff on social media about COVID and that, it didn't help. And I was getting no answers, nowhere where I turned. So when I found out the reason why I was excluded, which is, as I say, essentially, I moved jobs too long. The ironic thing is, before I went to that employer, if I hadn't finished a trial another place, I would have been included, because I was just like a couple of days out from being included. So it's it took me down quite an eye-opening path, because my mental health deteriorated very quickly. I started experiencing panic attacks, which took me to Royal Cornwall Hospital. At the time, I've got to be honest, I thought I'd actually got COVID, because I was just, evenings, I was struggling to breathe. I was in a really bad way, but then thankfully it wasn't. Although, having panic attacks and whatever, that was a new thing for me, and nothing seemed to be changing. I just thought, well, it's just a date. I've got all the information you'd need here. You can see I've worked with this employee before. I could log into my HMRC app right now and show you that this employer is a genuine employer, that I have all the history there. I have so much evidence to back up this claim. And then you hear things like, we're trying to protect the taxpayer from fraud. And I'm just like, well, why don't you just protect me first, and then look thereafter, because it's clear as day that I'm no fraudster. And at the time I thought it was just new starters like me who started their job at the wrong time. But then when Excluded found me and I realized the gravity of the situation, where it was actually millions of people, like I say, from all walks of life, all industries, all social standings, it was we've got a big problem here, because this is going to snowball. This is going to snowball, and it's going to snowball fast. And then since that time, I've been probably, as relentless as anybody to try and get us heard on this, because even now, 1 year later, although it affects the majority of those that are excluded, you don't need to be an expert to see that it's going to affect those who aren't excluded as well. My employer, for example, she was excluded from the business schemes. She still furloughed her staff, but had she not taken out a personal loan, then none of us would have had jobs to go back to in July in the first place. And that's when I got to go back to work, was July. So I even got the pleasure of cooking for Mr. Sunak's Eat Out to Help Out scheme, being a chef. So that was rubbing more salt in the wounds than one needed.
Yeah.
So I left there September, come back to Wales. Wales went into a local lockdown. Sorry, my area went to a local lockdown. Then Wales announced their lockdown. So again, I had to try the universal credit. And again, more issues with the universal credit. And I honestly, Damien, I wouldn't be where I am now without Excluded UK and the support I've had from within the group, from specific members who have helped me get by and have really picked me up to be, if you spoke to me back then, I'm a completely different individual. But like Cheryl and Rachel, I'm determined to see this through, not because it is such a big injustice, but because I'm a people person. Don't bore me with the facts and the details of why you can't do this, can't do that. It's people, and it's real lives, not just 3 million lives either, because those lives have a partner with children behind it. And that's why I think it is so vital that we just keep pushing this through and hopefully one day seek the change that we so desperately need for ourselves and for the wider country, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, they always like to say, this government, that work is the root out of poverty. But when you're unable to work and they set arbitrary dates by which they decide, oh, well, we can't help you now, it is an absolutely diable dereliction of their primary duty, which is to look after the people of this country. They're not doing it. And mental health issues due to insecurity brought on by universal credit. I mean, your story actually resonated with me a little bit as you were telling it, because my oldest son, he was due to start at a amusement park in West Cornwall, where I live, and just before he was due to start, the first lockdown came in, and he'd had his interview, but of course he'd never started. He was not furloughed. He had to go through that universal credit rigmarole. He's got learning difficulties, so he struggled to deal with the website and the questions and all the rest of it. And although he has picked up some work in security, it's not what he's trained for or trained to do. And a chef is a tough profession to be in. It's long hours. It's hard work. My other son, weirdly enough, is a chef. And so he's fortunately, he was included in the furlough scheme, but it's still a very small amount of money. And when he's 18, he is not bringing in huge amounts of money anyway. What little he is getting is barely covering any of his costs, really. And of course, I remember you saying about your boss and the fact that she was able to furlough some of her staff, but obviously she wasn't subject to the business scheme herself. So often the Conservatives have offered loans to these businesses to try and keep them going, but loans have to be paid back. There's been grants too, but an awful lot of the emphasis that we've heard about is loans. Why they just cannot support people. I mean, if they can spend £37 billion on a test and trace system that didn't work, why can they not support people who are, the workers of this country, the backbone of the economy, for heaven's sake? And they are always on about the economy, aren't they? It's just, but this is 10% of the UK workforce. It's unfathomable how it's so many people that are not subject to help from this government by their own rules. And you can only assume that this is deliberate. And of course, this crisis that we've had has been prolonged far longer than the 3 to 4 months that you mentioned, Cheryl, that you expected it to be. We're a year on. We've come out of a third lockdown. Many people have not returned to work. This is a huge scandal. And, Rachel has been on various media outlets to talk about this, but it's not gained much traction as you might imagine it would. Why are things not cutting through, do you think? Why is this scandal not more prominently reported on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on your point of view, because we've gained a lot of alliances and support across the piece from unions, organisations, who I guess are a bit battle weary themselves because they've been in this game a lot longer than we have. And what they've said to us all along is, unfortunately, this is just yet another example of things that we've seen over the years. So kind of belt yourself in for a journey, right? And what they've said to us actually as we've gone on this journey is that they have an incredible amount of admiration and respect for the way that we've conducted the campaign, that we've been professional, that we've been factual. Obviously, we can't control all of our members' activities, and people are angry. And so some of what occasionally happens on social media can seem quite aggressive. But our core campaign and the way we've conducted ourselves has been to focus undeniably on the facts and to push for the due process. I think when you then, if we had the time to go through all the different things that have happened, such as, for example, the Chancellor has sat in front of the audit committee and taken questions. There have been numerous, and I mean literally hundreds of questions in Parliament on this issue. And we've watched it unfold. For example, there'll be a direct question, why are you not supporting these 3 million workers? And the answer typically will be, we have spent this much money on the support schemes and we have helped this many people. It's not answering the question. Right? So these stock answers, these ministerial statements are what has been the biggest barrier for us. All we've ever asked for, naively as it turns out, is a proper consultative process. We want to know that they've looked at how to solve the problem. I would love to hear that, the HMRC or the Treasury have been asked to conduct, please find out how you can help these people. And if they'd have been then come back and said, unfortunately, for these reasons, it's not possible, I think some of us would be accepting of that. It's the fact that they haven't even tried. Okay, so the narrative very simply has just been, it's all complex and we need to prevent fraud. And then some stuff around, this system doesn't talk to this system within Treasury and HMRC or whatever. None of us are interested in that, quite frankly, because we've also watched the government do incredibly complex things in the wake of this pandemic and in the general course of things. Anything is possible, as we all know. So that was my point at the start when we're talking about this. If there was the will to do it, it would be possible. It's the fact that there doesn't seem, and we don't know why there isn't a will, because it is a very diverse group of people. I think the only thing that we can assume is that the narrative around, but we've already helped this amount of people, means that they feel they've helped enough to take the public with them into the next stage. And because we've not managed to gain enough public empathy with our cause, which is deeply sad in of itself, and we've tried lots of different ways to explain, visually or simply. For example, if you take a row of terraced houses and there's 10 of them, somebody is a key worker, a frontline worker, that's brilliant. You've worked all the way throughout. We love you and admire you for it. Other people who are self-employed, who've received the grants, other people who've stayed employed in other roles, other people who've been furloughed. So you could keep going down the houses, and then in one of those houses there will be one of this category who's got absolutely nothing for no good reason. And that's divided that society. Another visual example might be 10 people queuing up for a restaurant and 7 of them are allowed to go in and have a meal, and another couple of people get a meal but it's not quite as good, and then one person is kicked into the gutter and told they can't have anything. Or 10 people in a vaccine queue and 9 of them are given a vaccination and the other one's told, sorry, not enough money to vaccinate you. So you can keep going with these examples to just genuinely show the fickle hand of fate. It could have been you. There's no reason why this plumber or this electrician or this construction worker or this hairdresser should be treated any differently from their mates who they normally drink down the pub with on a Friday night. Can you get behind us, public? But we haven't managed that in a significant way. And I think, unfortunately, Damien, what we've then been fighting about, that the whole nation has gone through a traumatic experience. People are struggling for empathy. Everybody's just struggling to kind of survive, and everybody's tired and exhausted. And then when you lie that against, the government narrative has been so strong that even when people are hearing our stories, they're resonating with what they're hearing and they're thinking, God, that's awful, that could have been me. But then you'll get a ministerial statement on the back with this underlying current of like, but we have to prevent fraud, and they think, well, perhaps they didn't pay their taxes, or there's, perhaps there was something fishy going on there, and that's really unfair. I'm being careful with my words when I say that. It's genuinely just, that's what's really upset people, the way that they have been treated by that narrative that's made them out to be anything less than a law-abiding, hard-working, taxpayer. That's been incredibly upsetting for people to stomach. And then when we think about the latest narrative, which is all like, well, the vaccination program's doing well, everybody look forward, get back to work, it completely misses the point that this 10% of workers are now saddled with debt. Many of them actually, you know, the most vulnerable lost their homes, already accessing food banks, terrible mental health issues. We even know that members of the community have taken their own lives, which has been absolutely devastating for us to both witness and then try and move forward from. And that's why you will hear people like Cheryl and Tim, you know, speaking so passionately, both about their own situation, but about why they're determined to keep fighting on because of what we've had to witness and have been unable to raise our voices loud enough to get it fixed, sadly.
Cheryl,
I'd like to add as well. I mean, absolutely amazing again, as you always are, Rachel. It is the, you know, it's the understanding why people don't understand what we're going through, and I think when you tell your family, and it's a bit like, you know, something's happened, and they're like, oh God, she's talking about that again. But this is still happening to me. You know, I mean, I can't even get universal credit. I can't get job seekers allowance. I've been unemployed for a year, and I've never been unemployed in my life. And it's all because I've got a pension, I'm not even entitled to that. Because I've got savings, I'm not entitled to anything. And I just think, well, what have I done wrong here? This is absolutely... Well, the message that I get is basically, don't save, don't really, you know, achieve anything, and we will give you everything. You achieve everything, you'll get nothing. That is the message I got. And I think we need to reach out to the people that aren't getting it, but the people that aren't getting it have not gone through it. And I think if you haven't gone through something, then you won't get it, you know. And like Rachel says, it's been a massive thing. Everybody in society has been affected, you know. Oh, can't go to the pub. Oh, you know, and you're like, well, I can't go to the pub because I can't bloody afford it, you know. And you just think, oh, I mean, I know that's probably, you know, I don't go to the pub all the time, but it's just an example. And another example, like, you know, Rachel said all of those, it's like having 3 children. 2 children will be fed and one child won't be fed. And the child goes, well, what have I done wrong? Well, it's just the way it is. That is how the excluded are feeling, I would say, in general. That's how I'm feeling for definite. You know, I just think it's a massive message sending out to our younger people who may see this injustice, because they will eventually. You know, we are absolutely banging on about it all the time. And when I'm out, even going out walking with Mikey, I will tell people what I've gone through. And I will help anybody who needs any help. I'll guide them. You know, but it is an injustice. And I do think that eventually people will get what we've gone through. But at the moment, we're not getting any help. And the one thing that I absolutely just cannot understand is when you've got the likes of Martin Lewis, John Caldwell, you know, Gina Miller, unformidable lady, all the mayors, Andy Burnham, Steve, all of them, you know, they're all fighting our corner and they're not listening. And like when you ask a question, when they, you know, they ask, the MPs have been asking questions about us and they just talk about something else as if we are dismissive. And at the end of the day, behind every single person is a life, you know, and then people who can't make it are losing their lives. The people that are just getting by, you know, they may affect their family because the kids are seeing them suffering. It's not just the excluded, it's everybody. Everybody is going to be affected. And I do believe, and I really do believe this, that eventually we will be known as the people that the unbelievable act that has been taken against us. It will be known. It will be known. And the government, I hope, will have to face that one day. And they'll have to face answering why this happened.
Yeah, I mean, providing for yourself and looking after your, investing for your own future. And the government has basically said, well, you've got to spend that now to look after yourself because we're
Yeah.
not going to help to pay to support you. And that, as you said, what is the
think
point in saving? What is the point in having a pension if that is the attitude they're going to take?
I think
And
it's even worse than that, though, Damien, because what they're not doing is adding those rules in on those people who can claim. So, of course, all the people that have been furloughed and have been able to claim the self-employed grant, there's nothing around the checks there that say, and you mustn't have, a savings in the bank account, or you mustn't have a partner that works, or whatever, the universal credit rules that these people have now been excluded on. And there is the big problem is, as we know, economically now, across the nation, there's 160 billion pounds of savings in bank accounts. A lot of people love these schemes. A lot of people have been helped by the schemes, and they love the Chancellor. And we've been very careful in our campaign to say, for those that have been helped, these schemes have been wonderful, but they must have been fair and accessible to all taxpayers at point of entry. The fact that they weren't originally was forgivable because they were put up in fast speed. The fact that they're not a year on is unforgivable because there's been so many opportunities, and what's actually happened is that those were helped in the first wave and the second wave have then just received more help into their bank account. So there's been no attempt to then redistribute that help. Even in the budget recently, the Chancellor called it a major improvement in access when the newly self-employed can now claim the fourth and fifth self-employed grant. And he said it was 600,000 people originally. We've gone and disputed those numbers. We think it's closer to 150, 200,000. And even then, that small group of people who can now claim, they're not getting backdated parity. So there's no sense of actually, now we've let you in for this future grant, we're also going to allow you to get the grants that you should have got. Now we've amended the rules. So even that in itself is a missed opportunity to right this wrong. But it feels like it's a great opportunity for them to say, hey, look, it's a major improvement in access. As you said in your introduction, the devil's in the detail. Yeah. And we never get enough opportunity in the press and the media to then say, let's really work through some examples of this and how is it actually helping people. So if you took a newly self-employed person who can now claim the fourth and fifth grant based on 80% of their trading profits from their 2019-20 tax return, which they can now put in, which they couldn't do previously, for the vast majority of newly self-employed, that amount won't be very high because you don't tend to make very much money in your first year of business, particularly not if you've had to invest in stock or equipment or whatever. So some of them are getting like £500 and now they're classed as included, but they've had £500 for a year. It's like insane.
This year as well, isn't it? It's crazy.
It feels very Victorian, in the sense of like you're going with your hands out and, please, sir, can I have some more, and well, you should be grateful because you've had £500 and you were allowed to defer your mortgage, or there was a loan there for you that you could have taken, or use the safety net of universal credit. Whilst in your row of terraced houses, other people are saving money and they're really looking forward to booking their holidays and getting back to the pub, and that is incredibly divisive. Yeah. And as you said in the beginning, Damien, it's not what was set out. It's not what made people stay home and do their civic duty, save the NHS and protect lives. They relied on that promise.
Yeah.
That no one would be forgotten and we'd stand shoulder to shoulder. They relied on that and they did the right thing. And then the economy was closed down. They couldn't work, but no compensation for even basic living expenses. And just in terms of trying to get the public to understand this, we always say, how much do you have in the bank account to get you through a month or 2 months without income? What would happen to you if suddenly you couldn't pay your rent or your utilities or feed your children? How long could you genuinely go on for? And most people, shuffle uncomfortably in their seats because we all know the answer. Hardly anybody in the UK today, in the way the system is set up pre-pandemic, hardly anybody has savings to last a year.
No, that's it. Tim, did you have your hand up a moment ago? Did you want to come back in?
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, I think it is just like Rachel and Joe was saying. It's the way it makes me all feel, So I mean, you know, like things like they said the furloughs capped at $2.5 grand, whereas like, you know, speaking about like to my teammates who were actually furloughed, I mean, working in hospitality, they get nowhere near $2.5 grand anyway. The industry's been closed for nearly a solid year, so they miss out on all the tips and what have you. And even that 20% loss in income, you know, that is a hefty drop. So, I mean, you know, it's not like anyone who is furloughed is all of a sudden, you know, in a better, you know, a great position. They're just in a lot of a better position than what those who are excluded in. But it's just, I don't know, to me, it just opens your eyes up to how wrong and how unfair everything is. And not because you think, oh, that should be me. It's just like, you have checked, you know, the only reason it is you is because you've checked the right boxes. You know, I mean, one of the people I worked with, they joined a couple of days earlier than me, so they got they got paid earlier than me, so they were protected. You know, I mean, I'm so thankful that they were protected, but I've got 20 years more paying tax than what that person is. Yet here I am now, you know, deep in debt, right back at the beginning of, you know, it set me back a fair while. You know, it has, but it's like, it's just all I've done since I've left high school is work my entire life. I've never had to, you know, use any of the welfare system or something. I've always stood the right side of the law. I've done absolutely everything, even with the pandemic. You know, I stayed at home, I saved lives to protect the NHS. I've followed every bit of guidance. You've got all the proof you need now. You know, I mean, especially somebody like me, for example, because as I say, it's not like they can't say it's not there. As I said to you earlier, they can check my app. Freelancers who have been excluded, you know, PAYE, so the tax at source. So, I mean, they've got all that. You know, they can't say that these people are maybe avoiding tax or potentially be fraudsters. I mean, these are all words of the government, you know, potential fraudsters or trade-offs or collateral damage. And it winds me up because, no, I am a citizen of this country. I am a bona fide taxpayer. I have done absolutely everything by the book. You know, I mean, forgetting even that it's the Conservative Party, I'd feel this way no matter what party was in government. Because to me, a government, it should be there to invest in the good times, support in the bad times. And then the other time, you only want to hear about what they've done well. You know, this last year, I think, is not just for those excluded. I think it's opened people's eyes up to just how wrong this government is. But, you know, it's like it's been a snowball effect, because the problems we are all experiencing now in some shape or form, like take the NHS, for example, and, you know, how that's its, you know, it was like capacity, it's bursting at the seams. But it's because of been successive governments which have made it like that, lack of investment. Obviously, the last 10 years, we'll say it's the Conservatives. It's all relevant. You know, we have made this rod for our own back. And, you know, to me, I've always been you know, I mean, I'm a Welshman, but I've always been a passionate Brit. You know what I mean? I mean, yeah, you know, we're Britain. But as I've got older, my passion has just gone like that. You know, it's sinking and sinking. I mean, this last year, watching Parliament TV, for example, you see what really goes on in the House of Commons. Oh my days! You know, it's the play on words. It's the not you know, the things that they're not saying. And even the, you know, I mean, I've been thankful for the media that we have got, but it's like there's a lot of things where you just think, why is no one seeing this? You know, why are we letting them get away with this? And I don't know. I mean, it's just so disheartening. It's like, what's the point? Yeah, what is the point? I mean, I should, by all rights, get disillusioned, but I'm not voting again. This is nonsense. You know, I mean, I've always been traditionally a Labour voter, but last December I found myself without any party to vote for at all. I mean, I spoke to you know, Sir Steer Carmer in May about this situation, and then I heard things. You know, the first time he mentioned it in Parliament was in September. And it's just like, I just think, because all I want as somebody who, you know, as the electorate or whatever, is someone who speaks on our behalf, you know, because it's not the government that does things in this country. It's always the people of this country who do everything. We pay all the, you know, we pay the debts off. We provide all the skills and resources for you to. For me, government has got the easiest job. They just need to utilize the talents that this country has. And it has massive amounts of talents. But what do? We seem to sabotage our own people. It's just, it's been a right eye opener, as Damien.
Yeah. I mean, it's you know, so an important issue like this that should get more prominent attention than it does. And then what you'll find on the newspapers is, hooray, we can go back to the pubs. Or isn't the vaccine rollout doing wonderfully? Aren't our government great, even though the NHS are delivering that? And, you know, as you say, you watch Parliament TV and it's a circus. You never get a straight answer to anything. And even on the committees, when ministers are being scrutinised, you will not get a straight answer, as has already been mentioned. And of course, they will continue to admire you and they will continue to respect what you're doing, but that doesn't pay anyone's bills, and it is pretty vile. But you have proposed a solution to this government. You have advised them of what your community members need. You're a community-led organisation, obviously, and that comes in the form of a three-stage approach: a one-off payment of £2,000 per person excluded, then to essentially furlough the excluded on 80% of pre-COVID income, and then thirdly, to enter discussions concerning back payments to place the excluded on parity with those who have been included, to essentially do away with anybody being excluded at the end of the day. It seems a reasonable proposal. Nobody will be left behind, as they have said, and we have repeated to them. But clearly, you have been 10% of the workforce, 3 million people. If the government was dealing with this properly, and obviously we've heard today that you haven't probably had that phone call from Rishi Sunak yet confirming what you're after. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be talking to me right now. But what has the government been? The government response to your calls been? Have they? You've been calling for this since last December. Has there been any headway at all?
So what you've just read out there, our three-stage proposal, actually was put on the table at the back end of November. And at that time, no, that's fine, because it hasn't changed as such. But it was really because we were so concerned going into Christmas, particularly about mental health at that time. People in the community had really reached the end of their tether. And, the fact that we put proposals on the table, we say we shouldn't even have had to do. This is not ours to solutionize. It is the job of the Treasury. There's an argument to say it's a bit rude putting forward proposals because, the fact that there's a problem and that it exists, we've proven that should be enough. As I mentioned earlier, it's up to them then to look for solutions, cost that up, decide what proposals will work. But fine, we worked and put forward those proposals, as you've said, and we did them in consultation with the all-party parliamentary group, with economists, with accountancy firms, with the help of the mayors and the MPs, just across the board, we tried to do what was reasonable. And the costings were of particular interest, particularly from a Labour perspective, because they have, as you probably are aware, unless something is costed, then they can't put their name to it from a kind of an open letter perspective. So we did our best to cost it as well. But of course, you're kind of going around in a ludicrous circle because they have the data, and not us. We've proved really hard, and it is now established that there are 3 million UK taxpayers, but all the data is on their side of the fence. As Tim was talking about HMRC records, the way that people have been employed, we live in a system and a society where it is quite hard by large as a normal citizen to defraud. And Tim said, PAYE freelancers, perfect example. They're often in the creative industries and they get taxed at source. So there's absolutely no question that they've defrauded the system in any way in years gone by. They can't claim either scheme, because they're not seen as self-employed and they're not seen as employed. So there was literally no scheme for that group of people to apply to. So anyway, these proposals have gone, into the Treasury. They went in via Jesse Norman. There was another proposal called DIS, which was put forward by Forgotten Limited around limited company directors. There was something called the TIGS, targeted income scheme, put forward specifically by the APPG, but it really mirrored our 3-point solution. It's just gone into a black hole. It just, it's like they say, well, okay, give us your proposals then. And then time passes, Christmas went, January went, we're just constantly calling for more meetings. And that's it really, Damien. And I can't make that point strongly enough. It's the lack of consultation, the lack of due process, the lack of leverage. And we look at it and say, we know that John Cordwell has gone in and sat in a room with the Prime Minister and with ministers and asked these questions and not got an acceptable answer. He's furious about it. And for him, it's not so much about the excluded. I know he really cares about us, but he's putting lots of pressure generally on the government to say, you need to spend more money. It's not a question of not spending the money. His pandemic recovery plan is around spending £350 billion more to help the economy to recover, of which this would be a tiny drop in the ocean. But for this, he comes at it from a pure economic perspective that if you don't help these people to get back on their feet, all they're going to do is become a drain on society. They're going to sit on the welfare state, and are there going to be, health implications of that? So even if you can't find the compassion from a human perspective, or you don't care about the discriminatory legal implications of what's happening, could you put your economic hats on and say, we're just kicking this can down the road and it's going to come out later? So whatever argument we've tried to use, and we've tried all of them, we believe, alongside these reasonable proposals, they just seem to fall on deaf ears.
Yeah.
And I think
that actually brings me on quite nicely to my next question, actually, because aside from calling themselves the party of business, as the Conservatives like to do, they also like to brag about being the most trusted on the economy. But what we're looking at here amongst these excluded people are small and medium-sized business owners, mostly, I would imagine. These are not people that make a fortune, but what they do make supports their local economy, creates jobs locally, encourages people to spend their money locally. And these are all the things that help the national economy to grow. So when they're so fond of talking about living within our means and not having the money to spend on the things that you've just outlined, isn't it actually economically irresponsible to not support the very people who bring growth at local community level?
Well, we would say so, of course, and that's core to our argument. But I think it comes back to their narrative, which isn't exactly worded like this, but they've already helped a lot of those people. They don't have to help them all. As long as they've done enough with these schemes to gain enough public support of the schemes were great, or even enough economic and political support that the schemes are. And that's the rub, I think. And as we've talked about today, the fact that there are all those amazing people, talented, diverse, and my heart particularly goes out to people in things like events and theatre and creatives, because their industries have no chance of opening up in the short term. So to be told, we're all going back to work, get back to work, their industries have been decimated. There's many people who don't think they're going to get back till 2022. Again, the other narrative we then get is, we'll just go and get another job, or, Amazon's recruiting, or delivery drivers. And that's fair enough. And some people have tried to do that. But generally speaking, there's not enough of those jobs to go around. So we also have people who've applied for hundreds and hundreds of jobs. How soul destroying is that? Yeah. And they're people who are incredibly talented at their particular profession. So there is an argument to say, well, God, okay, I'll do what I have to do, but why should I have to? This is not my fault the economy was closed down. Can't I just have fair and equal support with my neighbour who is just waiting it out?
Yeah, seems as long as the news headlines remain positive of the government, for them, as far as they're concerned, they've done enough. And it blatantly isn't, not with 3 million people struggling with no support. Cheryl, Tim, would you like to come in at all before I close up?
Tim?
Yeah, really. It's been a whole learning curve. As I said, the whole lot. I mean, I've never been political, so that it's opened my eyes up to an awful lot. But also, because I'm just like I said earlier on, just your average Joe who just works any job. It's opened my eyes up to a lot of misconceptions about other people, like limited company directors and the self-employed. I mean, I'd be lying that if I said a year ago I wouldn't have thought the same. That some people might have thought, it's because they're doing the foreigners, or they're paying less taxes and whatever. But it's opened my eyes up to how wrong that perception of people are. Because they pay themselves differently, there must be something in it. I mean, I've learned an awful lot just by being part of the excluded, and it's I don't know. It's put a complete trust in the government and what they say. Just a complete lack of trust. But what worse than that, just to touch on it, because we have had such a wide support from so many MPs. that disappoints me as well, because the general perception of like MPs as they're all in it for themselves and what have you. Yeah, we have loads who are standing up for Excluded UK, speaking up for their constituents. Yeah, they get tarred with the same brush. You know, it's like you're tarring everybody with this dirty brush when really it's, you know, we should all just be in it together and all be getting through COVID first and foremost, because let's not forget we are still in a pandemic, which moving forward is unlikely to just disappear overnight, isn't it? So, you know, I don't know, I just feel like we need to be creative, proactive, you know, investing in things just purely because if we don't, the snowball effect of that is going to be massively damaging. It would cost so much less, whatever the cost to support Excluded, it'll cost less now than it will do in the future, because in the future, what you're going to find is you not only created an economic pandemic with the fact that people are losing their jobs, but you've created a mental health pandemic on top of it. You know, and then that goes beyond the excluded. That's their partners, their children, and children have been absolutely crucified throughout this pandemic in itself. You know, not being able to go to school, not being able to, you know, hang around and socialize with their friends and what have you. So it's like, I think that's the thing that they don't see. It's like it's just one great big. I think we're in a world of trouble, basically. You know, in a world of trouble, and my biggest fear is the general public. You know, God love him, is they're going to see this too late just because of the spin that's been put on it all, you know, and it's something we need to nip in the bud now so we can protect as many people now, because it'll make our job a hell of a lot easier than it will do later on down the line. You know, we see enough of it, don't we? We see how stretched the NHS is. We can see it's not, you know, as far as like mental health goes, it's not had the best investment for it. And, you know, that then goes against the initial message. How can you save lives and protect the NHS? Well, you're creating more work for the NHS by not, you know, by creating this mental health pandemic. It's just, I'm not an educated man, but to me, if I can see this and those that aren't in government are not seeing this, that me spells problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely fully agree as well. And the way I sort of see it, within the arm, I do apologise, but Mike has just been barking at somebody at the door. The way I see it is the economy needs to be rebuilt, and the economy is this massive machine, and it's got many cogs in there, and it turns all the wheels and everything like that. Now they've taken 3 million cogs out of that machine. That machine it's not gonna work. It is not going to work. So they need to look after them 3 million people to make that machine work. And that is how I logically look at it. I don't really get all the political side of everything. At the end of the day, if for me, my business is not coming back because there's no holidays. The holiday business is not coming back because of this. And it's like, it goes back. Everybody is affected. You know, the airlines, all of that. It's just a massive thing that we need to get fixed. And I think the government need to face up to it, realise that they've done this inconceivable act towards these 3 million people, and they start to fix it. Don't be embarrassed that you've made a mistake. Fix it. Do you know what I mean? Stop hiding behind a political thing that is, you know, oh yeah, we've done this, we've done that. Stop it. Listen to the people. We came, like Rachel said, we came up with the solutions. Then people were left with nothing at Christmas. The Excluded UK helped them through that period. We just, as a community, all came together, and that is why I'm so passionate. And I just think the government now need to face up to it and just rectify what they've done wrong.
Well, a number of MPs do tend to watch this show, so hopefully a few of them have and have heard your words tonight, and will take notice and take that up. But if not, then Excluded UK will continue to put pressure on them. You guys have an open letter to the Chancellor on your website calling for him to make those changes. Your website being excludeduk.org. Please do visit, please do sign up. If you identify as somebody excluded from government COVID assistance, get involved on the Excluded UK website. Join their community forums. You're far from alone. There's 3 million people out there. It's a great place to get organized, get support, and fight as a collective, because in strength of numbers, in solidarity, you have more power. So support these good folks and their work if you can. Many thanks to you all for joining me tonight. Would you like to give out your social media pages, links, so people might follow you and keep up to date?
I think the best way to follow us would be the main Twitter page, which is Excluded UK. Simple as, and through the website, because through the website itself, you can come and join our group, where there's a wealth of information if you are excluded, but crucially, there's an awful lot of support for people who get it. You know, that's one of my biggest things about this entire thing, is the people who've still not found Excluded UK, who think they're completely alone and think they're the only one, it's only happened to them. You know, I want as many of them to find us, not just so we can keep fighting this, but so we can support them in the way they need to be supported, because that's something that doesn't get mentioned a great deal when you talk about Excluded. It's the stuff we do behind the scenes, you know, the mental health support that we offer, so we can get you that support within 48 hours. You know, we've done all this through various things of our own back, you know, financial advice, debt advice. There's so much that we do behind the scenes to just ease that pressure on you a little bit. But crucially, because we know what you're talking about, because we're all experiencing it ourselves. So if you come to Excluded UK, you will find the support that's there, somebody who understands, there's somebody who wants to help, but we can only help if people help us, you know, Excluded.